Next item is a motion to accept the agenda, please.
So moved.
And a second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, the agenda is accepted as presented. Next item is meeting procedures. We have a small group here tonight, so I think we'll run as a normal meeting does. So we'll move on then to our public hearing section. And the first item is application 23-12, which remains open from our prior meeting. And my understanding is we will not be hearing this application tonight. So I believe we had a motion to continue this public hearing. So, motion to continue application 23-12, 220 Isinglass Hill Road. Request for special permit for construction of an 8-bedroom residential care home. Application of Orville Place LLC and property of Sean McGrail Revocable Trust, map 129, lot 9, zone RR. May I have a second to the motion, please?
Second.
Okay, we'll now vote, beginning with, not you, you're recused.
Yeah, so we would have Tom vote, since
Okay.
he was seated for Victoria.
Thank you. Okay, Tom, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes. Chantel?
Yay.
Rob?
Aye.
And that's it,
yes.
right? Jen is not here.
Yeah.
So, the
So,
motion,
yeah,
the motion
four.
does pass.
That's fine.
I forget who seconded that. Thank you. Okay, we'll then move on to application 23-15, which is a proposed amendment to our zoning regulations. I think I'll skip reading the whole thing at this point because we will go through it in detail as part of our discussion. The public hearing for this is closed, so the public comment section is done, and it is now up to us to deliberate. So, like we did at our prior text amendment, since this is composed of several different items, there are 3. I suggest that we address them one at a time, because again, we have 3 options for this application. One would be to approve the application in its entirety. Second would be to deny the application in its entirety. And third would be to approve one or more of the 3 components of the application. So unless I hear any objections, I think we can probably take them just in the order that they appear here. So the first one, I'll read it in detail so we're all clear on what that is. And the proposal is change to section 9.17.1 to change to the maximum number of 2 bedrooms to 30% where 55% is currently allowed. So I'll open it for discussion then, again, amongst commission members. So it's proposing a reduction in the ratio of 2-bedroom apartments to 1-bedroom and studios in a mixed-use development.
Do you want to go? Do you want to say something, Victoria?
I don't have to go first this time.
I said this before, and my first issue was that we didn't know where the 55% came from, so
Right.
that kind of still bothers me, just because I like to know where things came from if we're going to change them.
We did find that out, though, right? There was, wasn't,
I didn't find a reason, but I think we came to the conclusion that it was original to the existing mud regulation. That's how it was set up initially.
Okay, but we don't have a real rationale for that.
No, we don't.
So, my issue is that I really think that reducing that 2-bedroom number down to 30% potentially limits a development from being what people may want. I think that studio and one-bedroom apartments are great, but if you're talking about two people living in them, I think maybe a higher percentage of people would like to have an extra room. I guess that's all I'm thinking, and I mean, I'm speaking as a person who has a lot of bedrooms, so obviously my feeling is skewed that way, but I just think that changing a regulation that exists to make it, you know, they're not saying that you have to have 50% of your units as, 55% as two-bedroom units. It's just, I think that restricting it is unnecessarily, could make it unnecessarily unattractive.
I agree. Not gonna reiterate the same. I agree with you on that. I don't think we need to, like, if somebody wants it, it's available, but it's not a requirement that they have 55%, it's just a maximum. So if somebody wanted to do the 70-30 as you were originally suggesting, they're more than welcome to, but I think that, you know, should be an option, I think, for the developer to choose, rather than us forcing it on the developer.
And along the same lines, in thinking about this over the last week, you know, the thought came to my mind, should we, in our regulations, have a percentage at all? Or should it be up to either up to the developer or up to the special permit process for the commission to decide at the time what an appropriate percentage is for the given site? That was my thought. Is it appropriate to have a percentage, regardless of what it is, in our regulations? Any thoughts on that?
So I have, I think that in our regs that are already in place, it is 30%. Not in an MUD, but in other developments. So for consistency's sake throughout the regulations, I think that, you know, I like to see consistency. I like to see, if it's 30% here, I'd like to see it be 30% there. So unfortunately, I didn't highlight the.
So, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what you're
I'm
referring to.
Because I should have referenced it.
So the current proposal out there is 30%, but that was because of the tax abatement specified that.
Okay.
So that's where that came from.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, the current tax
So
abatement specifies.
when I read that, that's what I was.
Referring to, yeah, so that's something that the Board of Selectmen at that time wanted to.
So that came from the Board of Selectmen, at 30%.
Correct.
Okay.
That's why it's.
And do you know why they said 30%?
My understanding is it's to limit families, and that's why I think also they don't have 3 bedrooms as allowable to limit families, and then the increase in school population.
Okay.
Certainly, based on Carrie's comments last time, she had indicated that you could maybe add up to a certain percentage, so that would give you some flexibility. Because as of right now, the way it's written, I think it would be the developer would propose that, and I'm not sure you could really, even in a special permit process, push back on the mix of units. You would need something in the regulations to point to.
Text amendment again.
Well, or you could, like I think Carrie had indicated last time, you could add up to a percentage, and then you could have some flexibility, I believe, there.
Okay, so that's where that 30% comes from. That's still interesting to me that the Board of Selectmen chose that 30% number, and the reason being they wanted to limit families in the mixed-use development. And so I'm just gonna, I have some pros and cons, and I just want to throw them out to you guys. So there was no opposition to this by the developer. He didn't feel that this mix hindered him. Now, he's already approved, but he didn't foresee that as a problem in the regs. And I found that interesting. I think that limiting the strain on public utilities is also a consideration. When I was looking at the numbers from the Public Works Department and the difference between adding a bedroom and not adding a bedroom, I mean, we're talking about a small number of apartments, but I'm trying to look at it like a bigger picture, as if we're gonna have more of these, right? Because we did decide it applies to any mixed-use development. So looking ahead, it does encourage less children. I think that a two-bedroom apartment does encourage families to move in. And I wonder about how appropriate that is in a mixed-use development where, you know, you're talking about a commercial space, really. The impact on the schools, I think, is a good one, and I find it interesting that the Board of Selectmen also pointed that out. And I think that the 30% to 55% does conform with a number of the things listed in the POCD, particularly like number 1, 2, 3, 6, and 12. And I think that there is consistency within the POCD to approve this 30% from 55. On the other hand, the things that weren't mentioned for the pros were there's some desire for higher density housing. You know, I don't personally agree with that in the location that we have a mixed-use development right now. And your point last time, Chantel, about having more options for people to have roommates, I think it is a valid one. But when I weigh the pros and the cons, I have to disagree with you guys in terms of that. I think that the pros outweigh the cons.
So Victoria,
Yeah.
I do want to point out that the stuff that was discussed during the Board of Selectmen meeting isn't really part of the record here.
Okay.
They weren't things that we discussed or considered. They weren't like things that they discussed during those meetings weren't really brought into here during this public hearing.
But Ben, when he was speaking, mentioned the consistency of the 30% throughout the town and where it was used in other places. So it may not be on the record in terms of the Board of Selectmen meeting, but Ben put it on the record when he was speaking at the podium at one of the, because I wrote it down. And then I looked for it a number of weeks ago, and I can't remember where I saw it, but that's how I got it. I don't listen to the Board of Selectmen meetings, so I got it somewhere else.
Okay.
So it's got to be on our record somewhere. And anyway, those are just my kind of things to think about and throw out there.
Okay. I want to just recall and you have to say whether this is allowed, Dan, because I'm going to recall a comment that somebody made at the high school for the discussion of the other text amendment there. Can I talk about that or not?
I mean, you can make your own comment, if that is a comment that you would like to make. I wouldn't bring in something from outside of the record, but if this is a comment that, or feeling that you have, you can make a comment.
Okay. Well, I heard it. I mean, I heard it.
I understand that, but if it's,
No, but I like I think the comment makes perfect sense. But
well, I mean, you could have those feelings without having heard that, correct?
I have those feelings.
Okay, so then you can express those.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I think this is something to think about, which feeds into this whole thing. Let's say I decide to move into a 2-bedroom apartment downtown. because I'm really tired of taking care of my 4-bedroom house. And I would not move into a 1-bedroom apartment, by the way, for the record, but I move into a 2-bedroom apartment. When that happens, it's not that children are gonna move into my apartment with me. It's
No.
that somebody's gonna buy my house and have a whole
That's
bunch
right.
of kids.
That's right.
So I think that the idea of focusing on how many children are gonna be living in that apartment is kind of a moot point, because the kids are gonna be going to the places that are being opened up by the people that are moving out of them. So,
Yeah, I think that that's very true. And I actually have that as a point somewhere else. So I think that's true. But I think people will also bring their families to a 2-bedroom apartment because it's a lot less expensive to be in a 2-bedroom apartment with kids than a house. You can't buy a house, you get an apartment, and you know, can put 2 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment, have 4 people living there very easily. Kids share bedrooms all the time, so it's just.
I think that having any apartment is going to create more kids in town.
I
That's what
think
I'm
that's,
saying.
that's very true. I agree with that 100%.
Whether it's
I
one
think
or two.
anybody that leaves a home, when neighborhoods turn over, children move in. There's no question about that. And that was one of the things we talked about when we were talking about going from 240 to 350 was, you know, exactly, yeah. And I think this is just another facet of that, and it concerns me. So,
Well, yeah, my thing is we miss out on the people who really are trying to share expenses, the roommates. I think that's really limiting for people who want a roommate that aren't cohabitating or whatever.
how many apartments are we talking about? Let's say we're 240,
So
so 50%, 55%?
It's 60. It's 60.
60 bedrooms.
60 bedrooms.
Yeah, so,
That's in the existing development, though.
Well,
It's
for
just
the
not-
max, for the
That's
max of
55.
2, if you had another
let me get a
Brainerd-
calculator. and
No,
do
it's
some-
60. If you had another Brainerd Place with 40, isn't it right? It's 60. I'm pretty sure I did the math. If you had 240, the max number of units, 30% of them at 1 bedroom versus 55, the difference, I believe, is 60. 60 bedrooms.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
That's significant. It is. It's like,
30,
it's like 60 studios, really. I mean, it's 60 more people using the bathroom.
Theoretically,
Well,
I mean,
Theoretically.
Yeah.
saying that,
Not
someone
if
could have.
Chantel moves in, because she's.
Or you have someone who just wants an extra room as a
Right.
hobby room or
Right.
an office or something like
Right.
that. I mean, I know a lot of professionals who'd rather have a 2-bedroom apartment rather than a 1, just so they can have that extra space.
what I mean.
You have a bedroom, you have an office or something, you
Yeah.
can separate your life out a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be like 100% filled with 2-3 people in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Okay, so 70.
So,
No.
I mean, we're talking
I mean,
about.
we don't know.
No, yeah, I already got that.
You know, that's the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's
I
like,
already
I'm
got
just throwing out, you know, I have a list of pros and cons.
And-
I'm just throwing them out.
I
For
think.
me, it weighs one way. I just understand. I get it.
Yeah, so it's 132 units that could potentially be 2 bedrooms at 55% or 72 at 30%. Now, again, you could do up to 55% and then potentially give yourself some leeway. And Carrie, you're on the call now, that's what I recall you saying at the prior meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. So, I mean, you do have an option. I mean, I suppose you could call that a compromise, because if you put up to, it would give you some legislative leeway as to how many 2 bedrooms could be there.
So.
But I might be the only one that feels the way that I feel. so-
I'm just given options.
So we would be replacing the words with a maximum with up to a maximum.
I believe so, yes.
I mean, I'd be fine with up to a maximum of 55%.
What's the
And
difference?
that-
It would give you some leeway in the regs as to how many two-bedrooms could be there. Because right now, you just give them the option of 50. Yes, so right now, it's just the option of up to 55%. But you could,
Legal way of giving us a little
Yeah.
more
And it
wiggle
almost
room.
feels like we're kicking the can down the road
Yeah.
too, a little bit.
well, it gives you options to decide. So if you feel this development shouldn't have 55% two bedrooms, you may be able to restrict it to a lower number of two bedrooms, to say 40. If you feel like it's a great spot for two-bedroom apartments, and it seems like there's lots of land and stuff like that,
And it's not right downtown.
yeah, you may have a different option. So I'm just trying to give you guys options. I'm not trying to
Right.
make it more difficult.
Let's keep in mind that this is an amendment change, a proposed wording change, which will be in effect in
Right.
for a long time.
Perpetuity. For a long
Right,
time.
so environmental things can change, which might drive the need for one bedroom versus two bedrooms.
The
So,
sewage concern's been brought up, though that's something that hopefully the town will, get the funds to fix.
Right.
It's not, I don't imagine that's a permanent problem. I think that is within this, a decade issue, but I can't imagine it will last that long. I hope not. I hope they can fix it, but, that's one of those things where, there should be plans to fix it. I can't imagine it's gonna be a permanent problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm fine with changing, the word with to up to and leaving it at 55%.
so clerically, if we were to decide to go that route, change the wording of the proposal, that would be a denial of this application and a resubmission? Or
No.
we have the power to modify?
Yeah, I believe so. And Carrie,
Because it's less. It's not more strict, it's less strict.
we restrict, no, it's not technically so. I'd want to make sure Carrie's okay with that.
Yeah, so one thing I want to be clear, when you go to the up to 55%, obviously, you're gonna have to tie whatever number you pick between 1 and 55 to your special permit criteria. I just wanna make sure. You can't just, right, you have to tie it to the criteria that you are due down to consider to justify whatever number you come up with. So let's be clear about that. And then the text amendment, again, it's been brought up to you that they want to reduce it to 30%. And so because changing the wording to up to 55% is less restrictive, I think it would be okay for you to go ahead and make that adjustment.
So Chantal, did you have a question about what Carrie said?
I didn't understand the first part of it.
So
I understand
basically-
the second part.
Tying.
Basically,
Yeah.
if you were like, we only think it should be 40% two bedrooms, you'd have your special permit criteria and the plan of conservation development, and you have to say, well, it should probably be only 40% because of this is just traffic. The extra two-bedroom apartments are gonna generate more traffic, or, so you see how you have the, whatever number of special permit criteria in section 10.4?
Yeah.
Those are what you kind of decide upon. So you would want to tie that,
To
that
one of
number
those
to
things.
one of those or multiple of
I
those things to show your reasoning.
So pretty much, we just can't be arbitrary about that application of it. If we want to reduce that number for an applicant, we need to have some reason that's
Right.
logical and justified to actually change it.
And we have those,
Correct, that's exactly right. I can't see who was speaking, but that was exactly right.
it was Rob.
That was Rob Taylor.
Kudos.
So that would be the 1, 2, 3, 6, and 12.
Or any combination that you can logically justify, I would say.
Okay, so it's already tied to that on the public record, because it's one of the things that we've been talking about,
Well,
right?
so,
Or-
yeah, but if the developer came with 55 and you thought that was too many and you wanted 40, then you'd say, I think it should be 40.
Because of 1, 2,
Because
3,
of
6,
that,
and 12.
yeah.
If
Okay.
that was the reasoning for that application at the time.
Okay. Well,
So, let's see, I'm not sure how to get kind of a consensus as to whether we want to replace the maximum with an up to the maximum of.
I would suggest that somebody make a motion.
I'll make a motion to replace the language with a maximum of 55% to be up to a maximum of 55%.
I'll second the motion. We'll now vote.
Carrie, you ready for a motion? Yeah, let me just write that in. Well, do you want to go through all three and then vote at the end?
I was gonna vote on the motion for
Okay, yeah,
for the
okay, I'm
wording
sorry. Yep,
adjustment.
Yep, okay, I'm sorry.
And then at the very end, we'll go through it.
Okay, yeah, I think
Vote
that makes
one at
sense.
a
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So we're voting on the wording adjustment that Rob just made a motion for. and
we're
I
not
seconded
voting on we're not voting on
the text amendment.
the part of the text amendment, we're just voting on changing the words.
Clear,
Okay.
clear as day, right? All right, so Victoria, we're asking you to vote first.
So I will vote yay to changing the wording
Okay.
on
Okay, Chantel. Changing the
Yay.
wording. Rob?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Okay. Any further discussion on this proposed text amendment based on the new wording? Okay, then we will not vote on this. We'll move on to the second component of this application, and that is to add a maximum number of 16 residential units per historic building restored.
per historic resource preserved.
Well, I think that was the original language, was historic building. If we want to change it to resource, does that need to be another motion?
Historic
I would think
resource
so.
preserved?
I mean, I'm looking at the application, it says historic building, so I know everything else says is resource, but if we want to change what the application,
Then we have to have
another
okay.
vote, at least I think, I don't know if that's.
I would think so, yeah.
What, do we need to take a stop for a second?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, this is Carrie.
Yes,
My
Kim.
recollection, if you wanted the language in this regulation to mirror the language in your P O C D. That was my recollection, and I believe that that meant changing it from historic building restored to historic resource preserved, but I defer to Dan.
yeah, that's my understanding as well. And it was preserved in the VCI report. It's always been preserved. And restored and preserved mean two very different things.
And it's resource,
Then
not
it's
building.
just- Yeah,
Correct.
historic resources.
So do we have to have a motion to change the wording again of, we have to do the same thing, right? We have to change,
I think that would make sense.
Yes,
Okay.
I do too.
that's what Rob said.
Yeah. So, Rob, I'm gonna call on you again, please. Could you make a motion to make this wording adjustment?
Yeah, just so I have it clear, it was historic resources preserved. Okay. I'll make a motion to adjust the language of the proposed text amendment from historic building restored to historic resources preserved.
Second,
Okay, we'll now vote. Victoria,
aye.
Chantel,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Okay, so the wording is adjusted. Now, discussion, based on the adjusted wording.
So, I'm not in favor of this. I think it makes it far more complicated than it needs to be. That, and I think there's a lot of room for, I don't know, ambiguity of just how it can be used, and probably incorrectly or inappropriately. I don't like the idea of having, being able to move something to a property like a railway tie to, a different property and call it preserved, and then, be able to, manipulate things that way.
Can you just manipulate things, or that you have to it has to be an approved resource, right? So, I mean, you can't just move a railroad tie and call it a resource. You have to have it approved as a resource.
I think it would have to be on the list of.
It has to be on a list, yeah.
Right, and I know there's talks of, or there was at least a mention of talks of, that list getting expanded, and I think I've heard the word significantly. So, I don't know what's on the list now, and, in a year, that list could be very long. And
That's a good thing, though, right?
Maybe. It's just that, I think that this proposed amendment just kind of makes the whole section just more difficult and unnecessarily complicated. That, I think that there's better ways of encouraging, preserving historic resources than through this text amendment.
How?
I have no idea. I just don't think this text amendment is it.
Okay, so where does this list, who generates this list?
You do.
Okay, so.
As part of the POCD.
Okay, so
development.
if we're gonna generate the list, we're not gonna approve just some random, like, shack to be called, okay, if you move, well, are you? I'm not, I mean,
Boards and commissions change all the time, so that, maybe this commission won't, but who knows in 5 years? A different group of people could be sitting here, and they might be a little bit more zealous than we are.
about preserving historic resources. I
Or
mean,
just adding things to a list that may not necessarily need to be on it. I mean, it's
don't
just,
know.
there's a lot of ambiguity in historic resources in that
Right.
term. It just seems like that adding this just kind of just makes the whole thing more complicated. And I think that's really more my point, is that it makes it more complicated when it doesn't need to be. As, leaving it as it is fine. I mean, if you recall how much effort it took Dan and Carrie to wrap their heads around it and figure out exactly what it meant, then, well, what about an applicant who's trying to figure it out? I mean, do they need to hire an attorney just to read a section of it and interpret it properly?
Well, maybe we need to make it a little bit more clear, because I do think it does encourage greater historic preservation, and I think that's a good thing. And it does conform with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items in the current POCD. So I think we would have to have a better reason than it's confusing, or that it may create ambiguity to vote it down. Just because it does meet so many of the requirements listed in the POCD.
Right. Just, if I could just interject here, I want to challenge on something here. To me, this statement, the way it's worded, well, I have 2 issues with it. One is that it's way too vague. The historic resource is way too vague. I think it's great to give incentive for restoring historic resources, but it's got to be kind of, I'm going to say it, the bonus that you're giving the developer for preserving a historic resource has got to be related to the value of the historic resource. It's all relative, is what I'm trying to say. And to me, this statement to add a maximum number of 16 residential units is severely reducing the incentive from what it is today. So in today's regulations, we say if you preserve a historic resource, you get a number of additional residential units per 5,000 square feet of commercial space. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
So, and this is saying you get a maximum number of 16 units per resource restored.
That's in addition to,
In addition to
that's
the
in
1 to
addition
3.
to the ones you get.
It actually, Dan gave us a memo on that, and so, you know, he like, one of the examples was, you know, number of historic resources preserved, he gave us like 3. Commercial square footage proposed, 100,000. Total max units allowed under those regs, or under that would be, under the current regs would be 240. With this change, it would be 108. So you'd be pretty much cutting out and contradicting that other number that's already in there.
Cutting out and contradicting.
And it's not like, you know, like, that's gonna help a developer wanna come in if they have to restore several houses to get anywhere close to, you know, some of these larger numbers. Because, I mean, restoring old houses is not cheap, especially if you have to do it historically accurately. You know, satisfy the historical society. It's a really expensive process, and, you know, you could just kill a project just with that.
Well, this isn't saying that you have to restore them. It's just giving you a benefit if you do.
Right.
So it wouldn't kill a project because you could decide not to choose this benefit.
But then they wouldn't be able to build as many like residential units, which in this current market brings in a lot more money right now. I mean, every day we're seeing on like, you know, the news, how much in demand residential units are needed and wanted across the state.
All right, well, I'm convinced that you've
So-
won me over.
So
sort of.
if I
Sort of.
understand Dan's memo then, in the example we just talked about, 3 resources preserved, 100,000 square feet of commercial. Current regulations, we would allow 240,
It maxes out.
maxes out. Under this proposed change,
It would
we would
max
allow
out at
108.
108? Or
No,
we
you-
would allow 108 additional?
No, you would only get 108 apartments, so you'd build 100,000 square feet of commercial, you'd restore, and we keep saying restore, preserve three historic homes. Right now, you would cap out at the 240 maximum. Based on the change, you would get 108. So even if you build 200,000 square feet of commercial and preserve 3 historic homes, you're still not capping it.
You're still getting at
Yeah, so,
108, you're stuck at
So
100.
you're really, I mean.
well,
it
you're
is-
not stuck at
Not
108, but
Right.
you would add, for 100,000 square feet, you would add another 60 additional units. So you do 200,000 square feet of commercial, preserve 3 historic homes, you get 168 apartments.
It significantly limits the number of apartments.
Yeah, and so I opine on that at the end of the memo.
Okay, all right, all right.
So, and I guess, just for clarification, like, the 2 following text amendments would drastically alter any compromise that you could potentially do as well. Because you would make your existing approval non-conforming.
I'm sorry, I don't get that.
So the existing approval
Right,
that
would
you
be
have would be
non-conforming.
non-conforming because you have too many units on site based on the number of historic homes being preserved as well as the amount of commercial space.
Okay, right. Okay, right. Because what we're addressing here is,
I mean, it applies to all
Going forward
potential
only.
sites going forward, yep.
going forward.
And just for clarification, if the existing site plan for like a brand new place, they came back with a modification, that would, this regulation, the new changes would then apply to that modification, or,
Correct.
so, okay.
So my other issue with this, the whole wording of this is the vagueness. You know, giving a incentive to restore a historic resource when this historic resource could be a Brainerd house or it could be a railroad bed. To me, very different incentives you would want to give a developer who's proposing to preserve a Brainerd house versus a railroad bed, you know? Does that make sense? Am I making it clear?
You are, to me.
So I'm not sure we can address that vagueness as part of this application, but I think it's something we probably should look at as perhaps one of our own text amendments at some point in the future.
I mean, that's something I think we can address when we go through the POCD stuff.
Yeah.
We can try to narrow down or expand, you know, and address the things that we do want to see, you know, or try to bring in someone who wants to help preserve some of these things that, you know, are important for, you know, Portland's historical history. But I think right now, I think we should leave this text amendment, or leave the text as it is and discuss the historical stuff down the road, you know, in line with how we want to see the town with the POCD stuff.
Just a question, does the POCD, can the POCD address things like affordable housing requirements and developments?
Yeah, I believe so. And I guess,
Take that to POCD too, what we were talking about.
I guess in talking with, in line with Rob's comments, you could separate out resources in that list too. I mean, you could identify significant resources, you could you know, you could have significant or just regular, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
only the significant ones would then, you know, enjoy the increased density
Right.
provided by preservation.
Right,
And that may address, you know, some of the issues.
and we can make it much more attractive for a major resource rather than,
Certainly with whatever input you get from the townspeople and your
Yeah.
own judgment, you could craft that as you know, you see fit.
as part of the POCD.
Okay, any more discussion about this component of the application? Okay, hearing none, then we will move on to the third and last portion of this application, and it reads, to remove text from section 9.17.5.m.2, quote, for good cause shown and following a public hearing, the developer may secure relief from this requirement as a modification to the approved plan, provided that the commission is satisfied that the conditions beyond the control of the developer will prevent the execution of the schedule of development as approved. End quote. So to try and summarize, this is proposing to remove the flexibility that the commission can grant to a developer based on circumstances beyond his or her control.
So, I mean, I understand the reason for at least the applicant's reason for this, mostly because of the, you know, the ambiguity behind.
Can you talk a little louder? I'm
I
sorry.
apologize. The
sorry.
ambiguity behind, like, the phrase "good cause shown." It is a very ambiguous thing that could pretty much cause a lot of, you know, like, problems. On the other hand, though, I think this is it's a good policy question of do we want to get rid of it as, because of that ambiguity? Or do we want to be flexible with, potential developers and, be able to let them know that, like, if there's an issue that's beyond their control, then, we're willing to negotiate and, listen to their concerns and try to find a solution to, whatever issue they're running into. And, when it comes to some of these bigger projects, when, and there's a lot of money getting tossed around on this, things come up, things change. I'm usually lean more in favor of being flexible at the sacrifice of having to, deal with a little bit of ambiguity, at least in this circumstance.
Mr. Chairman, this is Carrie Olson.
Yes, Carrie.
For what it's worth, and I don't know if it's helpful, but being your attorney, I figure I should at least mention it. There are many statutory provisions that us lawyers have to use where the standard of review for the court is good cause. And you can imagine that it would be impossible to sit here tonight and come up with every possible scenario that constitutes good cause, right? You're either going to be over-inclusive or under-inclusive. But what I feel is important to point out is that it's not just good cause. It's good cause that circumstances beyond the applicant's control. So there is a standard. There is, it's not just, they didn't feel like doing it when they were supposed to do it. They have to provide a basis for explaining why they're behind schedule, and you have to determine whether that's good cause. So I don't want anybody to think that there's no parameters here at all, and I'm not trying to suggest that you go one way or the other. I just feel that you should understand that as a legal principle, good cause is broad for a good reason, generally, but that your regulations also limited to good cause tied to circumstances beyond the developer's control. And they're going to have to establish that for you. So, I don't know if that helps.
It does, thank you, yes. So, my understanding is that if we were to adopt this amendment, this proposed amendment, we would be removing the flexibility that the commission has to work with developers and modify schedules.
So it would, at least, I think Carrie might, or Dan, you might be able to correct me on this one, but it would at least pull it from our hands on the zoning commission, but it would probably put it more onto like the zoning board of appeals for a variance application at that point, which then they would be dealing with a hardship standard.
Yeah, and I don't see any reason why an applicant would have a hardship with the land in order to get more. So it wouldn't be, I wouldn't recommend sending them to ZBA. Well, I don't think my ZBA would approve something. It's supposed to be a hardship with the land.
Mm-hmm.
Topography, lot shape, not something wrong with the commercial environment or the economics environment of the situation.
So, I mean, if a project couldn't proceed as it was scheduled to proceed, it would be an enforcement issue, ultimately, right?
Potentially, I don't, potentially, I don't know, or, the project may stop. It really, I can't foresee what, I've never developed anything. I'm a planner, I've looked at developments a lot, but I've never been in the trenches per se on that kind of stuff. So, but I think I would echo Carrie, if they wanted to avail themselves of the current regulation, they would have to provide good cause shown, and you would have, outside of their control. So they couldn't just say, you know, it can't just be like, I want less commercial, or I want more commercial, if they want to shift stuff around. So, I mean, if you wanted to move more commercial up, you would need this regulation, just as if you wanted to move commercial down. I mean, it goes both ways, so you kind of have to wait from there. But if you removed it, it would take away your ability to compromise or change or adapt an approval to some new unforeseen reality, which I know I don't want to bring it up, but we've all had that happen in the last 5 years.
Right. So, Dan did speak to this when he was here for this text amendment.
I believe so, yeah.
He did speak to it, and he did say, I believe, that he viewed this as something that was more or less, I'm paraphrasing, but more or less necessary for a developer to want to do business in a town, for the town to demonstrate some flexibility. And I believe he said that without something like this, he wouldn't even consider, working in a town. That's my recollection.
That's my recollection as well.
Yeah, except that there isn't, I mean, and I looked at some of the other towns that he's worked in and other town regulations, and I didn't see anything remotely like this in those regulations. So
Victoria, we got to be careful, because if it wasn't presented during the public hearing process and in the hearing,
okay,
we can't really bring in outside study information into that.
all right.
You get what I'm
I
saying?
think I said it, though.
During the open public hearing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I did, actually.
Okay.
It's not the first.
Generally, Victoria, the wise thing to do if you looked at other things is to get them into the record.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't do that, but I have mentioned this in the past on the public record, so in the future, I'll be careful to do that, Carrie.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
other questions or comments regarding this third component?
You want to hear my pros and cons?
Yes, please.
Okay.
The pros and cons.
So my pros are that, that we would eliminate the subjective nature of making decisions, and it does allow the board to be objective. And another point that was made is that the board is not able to be an expert in all areas needed to make these decisions. So there, when we're being asked to give leniency, we have to rely on what the builder is asking for, and we don't really get a full picture, and we're not experts on these things, so we don't really know. It also opens the door to an incomplete project. I think that's absolutely true. I mean, we've already put ourselves in a position where that may be the case, and the developer has threatened that that might be the case. So, also so those are the pros. And then the cons are, as stated, the developer said he wouldn't start the project without the clause, felt that banks and investors needed it. He mentioned that it allows the project to have momentum. If something comes up, that he can keep working. And if he does need a change, it reduces the cost to him of making those changes, because he just has to come before us. So those were the kind of the standout things to me in listening to all the back and forth. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing nothing further then, we will now move on and vote on each of the three.
I just wanted to just clarify with Carrie, because I still do think it's less restrictive, but, so the original change for the first one, Carrie, was to reduce the maximum number of 2 bedrooms from 55 to 30. By adding up to 55, it's less restrictive than bringing it down solely to 30, correct? And we can proceed with that change? Oh, Carrie, you're muted. Can you unmute her? I do believe it's less restrictive. I just wanted to make sure that she was on board.
I think she did say that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I just got a phone call from my associate. I apologize, I didn't get the question.
So, Carrie, I'm just double checking. I do believe it's less restrictive. Right now, the request is to change the maximum number of 2 bedrooms to 30% where 55% is allowed. And the modification the board made was to change it to, change the number of 2 bedrooms to up to a maximum of 55%. So it is less restrictive than what was proposed, so we could move forward with that, right?
Well, it's less restrictive than what was there.
Right, okay.
So it's not less restrictive than what was, because what was proposed was only 30, right?
Yes. Okay, but we're okay with that.
I know.
Right, because it's less, it's not like you noticed a text amendment for 30 instead of 55, and then you went ahead and changed it to 75.
Okay,
So
okay.
the presumption is that if anybody's interested and concerned, they're gonna show up and they're gonna hear. And again, the difference between 55% and up to 55% is really not that, it's giving you all discretion to work with the developer consistent with what you deem is in the best interest of the town based on the criteria in your plan of conservation and development.
Okay, thanks.
Confused because I thought it was 30. Whatever happened to the 30? Now I'm really confused.
30 is, it's in this proposal, but we reworded it.
Okay.
So 30 is gone,
Okay.
55, and it's up to
Up to
55. So do you have?
Yep, I have
each of
three.
the individual
Yeah,
motions? So
yeah.
we'll then, if we could have somebody read the,
If I read the motion, then I oppose the motion, then I am voting yes by reading the motion.
No.
no,
No,
no, you can vote
Yeah,
I'm
against
just
that.
proposing the motion.
okay. This is the first part,
Yeah, so I don't know if you just want to read to,
this part right here?
yeah, you may want to say to approve application 23-15, and then read that part just so that part's on the record. I
Okay.
think that makes sense.
To approve application 2315, motion to approve proposed text amendment modification to section 9.17.1 to change to the number of 2 bedrooms up to a maximum of 55%. Yes?
Yes, I believe so. Is there any confusion or?
No, I think that
Okay.
sounded right to me.
Reason, this application meets section 10.3 of the zoning regulation and conforms to the town's POCD.
May I have a second to the motion, please?
Seconded.
Okay, we will now vote. Victoria?
Aye.
Chantel?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Okay, so the motion passes. Now we'll move on to voting for the second component of this application.
To approve application 2315, motion to approved text amendment to section 19, not 9, you have 19.
Sorry about that.
Changing it. 9.17.1 to add a maximum number of 16 residential units per historic resource preserved.
And is there a reason?
Sorry. Reason, this application meets section 10.3 of the zoning regulation and conforms to the town's POCD.
Okay, thank you. May I have a second to the motion?
Seconded.
Okay, we'll now vote. Victoria?
No.
Chantel?
No.
Rob?
No.
Joe?
No.
I vote no as well.
And I'm sorry, one thing I forgot to, with the last motion that carried, we need to set an effective date. I don't know if you want to do July 1st, like the other regulations?
Yes, I believe that's,
Can we do a motion that
For
includes
all of them?
three of them?
Yeah,
at the end,
yeah, if
that
any
says
that
July
passed.
1st?
Okay, yep. I think that makes sense. Thanks, Victoria.
okay. So, the second motion fails.
Well, did you want to,
This is up.
Yeah.
Okay, I signed in the wrong
So
place.
do you want to just do that? Who seconded?
I read-
Motion
Did Rob
to
second?
approve application 2315. Motion to approve proposed text amendment to section, again, 9.
I'm sorry.
.17.5.m.2 to remove for good cause shown and following a public hearing, the developer may secure relief from this requirement as a modification to the approved plan, provided that the commission is satisfied that conditions beyond the control of the developer will prevent the execution of the schedule of development as approved. Reason, this application meets section 10.3 of the zoning regulation and conforms to the town's POCD.
May I have a second to the motion?
Seconded.
Okay, we'll now vote. Begin with Victoria.
Okay, motion to approve the, aye.
Chantel?
Nay.
Rob?
No.
Joe?
No.
I vote no as well. So the motion does fail. Okay, and that completes our,
We have to do the July.
oh, sorry,
the
thank you.
last-
Yep.
Yeah, just do a verbal motion.
Motion to
Set the effective date of the approved,
set the effective date of the approved motions to the text amendment, application 23-15,
to
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 July 1st.
July 1st,
Seconded.
2024.
May I have a second to the motion, please?
Seconded.
Okay, we'll vote now. Victoria?
Aye.
Chantel?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
I vote aye as well, so the motion does pass. Okay, thank you, everyone, for all that. Okay, we'll now move on then to our next item under public hearing. That's application 23-17, which is request for special permit modification. Application property of BRT DeMarco LLC, map 19, lot 68, zone B2, B3, and TCBD. So,
the developer has not officially withdrawn this yet, so I would recommend we just keep this on the agenda till next meeting and see what action he takes in that time.
And there's just been nothing has happened, you haven't heard anything at all? Obviously, you've heard something, but okay, forget it all.
okay, we'll move on then. To our regular meeting, and the first, we have two applications.
Dan?
Yes.
And I just want to make sure you remember that you have to start the public hearing within 65 days.
I know,
So it'd be- okay.
we're still
Just wanna
within,
make sure you- Okay.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just want to make sure you did the math, because when the text amendments were denied, the clock started.
Yes, no, they're within the
Okay.
clock, yep.
Just making sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. So we have two applications to receive. Application 23-18, proposed amendment to the Portland zoning regulations, add to use table in section 5.1 quote, offices, sale, service, and delivery of heating fuel products, end quote, to B1 zone as a special permit, application of TCBS Properties LLC. Anything on that one, Dan, you want to mention?
No, it's pretty straightforward as written. You know, I'd recommend just setting the date for that public hearing on the 16th, or the 20th, I'm sorry.
Okay, June 20th. Okay, next item is to receive application 23-19, 1359 and 1401 Main Street. Request for special permit for special event permit to hold the Portland Fair from October 4th to October 6th. Application of the Portland Fair and property of Cody Range LLC and Portland Farmers Fish and Game Club, Inc., map 75, lot 2, and map 68, lot 1, zone FP.
I believe the applicant would like it to be set July 16th. I'm not, or July 20th, I'm sorry.
July 20th
Or
or
June,
June?
jeez, I'm falling apart. June 20th, I'm not sure if they're gonna be ready with, some of their information, and if that's the case, we'll just push it to July, but they're just trying to get, ahead of the game.
All right, then, we'll move on to new business. Anything for us, Dan, under new business?
Oh, none, I'm sorry.
Okay. Old business, probably haven't had time to look at this.
No, and I was gonna say, maybe we could take a little break.
Okay, staff report, correspondence.
No correspondence,
Okay, Brainerd Place update,
nothing at this
nothing
time.
to discuss. One item I would like to add to this, and it's not a staff report, but a discussion. And, you know, this is a question, I guess, for you, Dan. I hope it's okay to ask. During some of the public hearings, there were questions raised about, relative to Brainerd Place, the following of established schedules and deadlines. And the question I have is, who oversees that and reports on it and tracks all the schedules that are in place?
That should be me. I'm the only one there, so I will get back to you on some of those things if you want to. I just have not had time
Is
or
that in your planner role or in your zoning enforcement role? Or
probably the zoning enforcement role,
zoning enforcement,
but
okay,
I oversee the department, so Buck would stop with me.
okay.
So certainly those, if you'd like those outstanding questions answered still, I'll circle back with Carrie on that and get back to you in due course.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
don't want to push you over the edge.
You're not, we're
we-
just, I will,
We
I'll work
need
with,
you.
I'll work with Carrie to get the answer as soon as I can. I'll probably prioritize 220 Isinglass at this point, in getting those questions,
Answered
worked
with Carrie.
out so that we're ready for the 20th. I'll try to do the other one as well, but, you know, if it goes to July, you know, I don't foresee anything impacting any of the answers between now and then.
You know, I thought when we talked about this a long time ago, and the fees that were paid as a result of, you know, the application fees for all of, there's a lot of money that goes into, you know, having all of this stuff happen. And my understanding was a lot of those fees were there to compensate for people that were supposed to be coming in and checking on this.
So a lot of that's happened on the building side. We actually received additional monies from the developer outside of the fees for, you know, engineering reviews that, for all the infrastructure that went in. Rick Kelsey has been working for Jeff Jacobson, doing a lot of on-site evaluations. I may have to request more money from the developer once we get firm plans on the preservation of historic homes, to have a independent eye review that and make sure that they are in significant conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. So I will, once we get those things firmed up, I'll be probably sending a letter. They have been working on this for quite some time. Pete has been working with the architect a lot to try to make sure that the proposed preservation of the historic home meets current building code and fire. So they've been working on that for months.
I would really like to push this issue of the town having a clerk of the works again on this site. And whether that be the zoning enforcement officer who is, maybe you have some candidate that's capable of doing that and knows enough to do that, would be a very good option. But if not, I think an independent person needs to be hired to represent the town on this building site. And it can't just fall to you. I think
It's certainly something to think about. You know, I can talk to Ryan, but I'd like to hire a zoning enforcement officer soon.
As a start.
It's been
That
2.5
would be
years.
nice.
I just really
So I-
want to push that issue
I
because
think
I
that-
think it's extremely important for the
That's,
town.
I think that's the role that needs to be filled to help to do that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
it's something we will be pursuing.
Yeah.
It's, the only difficulty right now is just finding time to do the interviews and stuff. So I do.
You know, if you can find the time to like do this, talk to Carrie and, you know, look at some of the things that maybe aren't getting done, maybe like,
Yeah, no, yeah, we're gonna be doing that.
you know, but maybe maybe the energy could go towards, you know, finding somebody to take this off of your plate instead of putting more on your
Well,
plate.
we are looking to, I
Okay,
think,
I'm
do it.
just
I
being
know,
pushy
I
about it
know.
because
We
I
are
think
looking to do an
we
interview in
really-
the future.
The town really
Yeah.
needs to have a representative on this site.
Understood.
Okay, all right, I won't, you know,
I hear you.
know,
I
I've
hear
been
you.
quiet about
No,
it,
no,
but
no.
I really feel very strongly
I
about
always
it.
want you guys to
Okay.
voice your opinions and thoughts to me.
Okay.
That's why I'm here. I'm not perfect, so
No.
I need guidance and information from you guys. So,
Sorry to be, you know.
no, you're fine. Trust me.
It's just-
I
I
deal with
just feel it's
I deal with
so
the lovely people of Portland every day.
Okay.
You are not being pushy at all.
Dan.
Well, maybe I need to be
Victoria, this is
pushy.
Terry. Victoria, this is Terry. I'm just gonna say, it's not just about this site. Dan is,
Oh, I know.
I don't even know how he manages.
No.
So there's a good reason to have an assistant for
Yes.
him in general for zoning enforcement for all
Yes.
of you. And so I echo your suggestion, Victoria, and I fully support it.
Excellent.
So have we, having worked in Waterford and in Norwich on some major projects, both those communities put a condition on our building permits that the contractor or the developer, which we were, was required to hire an independent engineering firm to oversee and verify the project complied with all the
Yes.
conditions.
Yes.
Have we looked at that?
No, that's currently happening.
Okay.
So the ICC reviews all of the building side of things.
This
So-
was everything,
So,
utilities,
so yes, everything, utilities, buildings, it will be for the preservation of those buildings as well. So,
and
yeah,
upon the completion of the project, the town would receive a report with an independent
so,
engineering approval
so, yeah,
that it met all your requirements.
the developers currently paid the town to pay Jeff Jacobson,
Okay.
who hired Rick Kelsey, to review all the utility work. The ICC is reviewing all of the building plans to make sure all those buildings meet code. And then we will have to hire an outside architectural or preservation firm to review the historical preservation. In terms of the zoning, though, that falls to me. So any deficiencies in that area is me.
So Dan, does that include, like, you said building code. So does that include, like, maybe if he mentioned brownstone on his
No.
building, so is?
No, that
you?
would fall to me, yes. And I know we had talked about the lack of brownstone before, so that's something I'm gonna have to loop back with Carrie and see what, once I can give her all of the facts and lay them out so she can see them, and then we can make a determination from there.
And I guess I'd like to go on record as stating that, my opinion, this position of clerk of the works for a project this big goes way beyond the role I would expect of a town planner or a zoning enforcement official to fill. I mean, to me, it sounds like it could be a full-time
Full-time job.
position. And I think, the sense I'm getting is that it's kind of being proven out that this position is sorely needed based on some of the testimony we heard, some of the conflicts in the testimony that we've heard. So anyway, just my 2 cents.
No, I don't disagree with any of you. I think if we have a zoning enforcement officer, a lot of this stuff is picked up, and then I have more time to also help them on this kind of stuff. So, we have John, and John's 4 hours a week. Mary wanted John Herring to go to 25, so I think if we get a zoning enforcement officer, we're adding a significant percentage of hours on the land use side to help do this kind of stuff. And hopefully, potential candidates have experience in these areas, which we're certainly looking for.
Okay, thank you. We will,
Got
go
one
ahead,
other thing.
go ahead, Rob.
So during a lot of the public comment of the last couple of applications we've had, we had a couple people get sidetracked on like the Welcome to Portland sign, and I understand it's a completely separate issue, but I understand that you.
Do you want an explanation on the record?
No, but what I was gonna say that is that if the developer's gonna be coming back for Brainerd Place, with, some type of, changes, there might be some type of, place or room or negotiation for finding a place for that sign on that area somewhere, maybe?
Yeah, I certainly can broach that with the developer. I imagine he's on right now, so he probably heard you. But yeah, I certainly agree with you. The rock, it's actually on it's actually on their site right now. Oh, it's Town Garage? Okay, yeah, they had to remove it though. So, yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah, so, yes, I will ask for that for you guys.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, thank you. We'll move on, public comment. Any member of the public who would like to make a brief statement? Comments may not be made regarding any pending application.
Ben Serb, for the record, 139 West Cotton Hill. I'd just like to actually stand up here and I have a couple things at the tail end.
You're
but
going to have to speak up.
I really want to just thank you guys for all the hard work you do, the thought you put into it. Even if I didn't agree with some of the thought process, I really do respect that you all came to a conclusion that you wholeheartedly agreed with, and I love that. So I really, people don't come up here and tell you guys that. You are volunteers, you put in a lot of time, you've put in more time in the past few months, so I really, really wanted to put that on the record, and I really like the thought process you all put into it. And I'm not going to get into too much, but Bob, I think you were heading it up. You are heading in the right direction. There are a lot of deficiencies with that application. I do believe it's too much time for Dan. Dan does a great job. I don't want to overwhelm him, but there are a lot of issues. And if you want me to come in, Dan, we don't have to do it on the record tonight. I could list them all. And just one more thing, and I'm hoping I can get an answer tonight. Ryan did send a default on the tax abatement that's completely separate. He also told me he was sending out default or violations on this site. Did that happen?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing I've sent out,
I'm
but I'm trying to get over like
that's enough.
tonight's hurdles before.
Nope, enough.
Yeah, so
I'm not going to stand
yeah.
up here. I understand things take a while.
Let me clarify.
Okay.
So right now, the one thing I'll probably be reaching out to the the developer would be on the soil and erosion control plan.
Yep,
So that's would be the first thing I'm gonna focus on.
a starting point. And I'm not standing up here trying to push anything. I think you guys are heading in the right direction. Please stay. I love, and Victoria, that somebody else used your phrase, clerk of the works. I'd never heard that. I love it.
I didn't hear you.
The phrase clerk of the works was actually used at another meeting, and I love it. We really do need someone that understands this, and we get the right product at the end. I want it to be successful. I think you guys, so just stay on that track. I greatly appreciate it, and thank you for everything.
Thank you for your words.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none then, we will move on to approval of the minutes. We have 3 sets to approve.
We only have the first 2 available. Dawn, and I'd like to just thank Dawn for all of her work. She's been doing 4-hour meetings. This is the 8th week in a row we've had P and Z, and she has other towns that she clerks for. So, thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see, we'll begin with the minutes from May 16th. So, I'm trying to remember who was seated at that meeting. Would have been myself, Rob,
Me.
Victoria,
I have to
Jen.
go look in my, do you have, you don't, I'm just gonna look at them on my
Jen,
phone. Sorry.
and probably Chantel.
And me for part of it.
And Tom, yeah, Tom for part of it.
So we're doing the 5/8
5/16.
or 5/16? I just noticed that we don't have anybody.
For clarification, Mr. Chairman, are you talking about who was seated or who was present?
Who was seated?
Okay, so all the alternates were seated on May 16th?
No,
No.
just Tom for
Just-
part of it.
Just Tom was seated as an
For
alternate.
Isinglass Hill.
For Isinglass, yeah.
So it might be a good idea just to clarify that for Dawn, so that, because I heard you say that they were seated, and maybe I misunderstood.
Okay, any changes or revisions to the 5/16?
Well, I just noticed that nobody,
Yeah, the
nobody signed, we don't have,
signatures
yeah,
on the motions.
right.
Oh, I don't think we ever have signatures on the
No, but it
motions.
doesn't even have the names.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant.
It doesn't indicate.
So
That's
the
all.
application, the 850 Portland Cobalt Road motion doesn't have like the motions approved by, the seconded, in favor, so it's blank. And
So
then,
I can provide that to you. So I'll email myself, and then I'll get you that information.
Okay.
So it was the vote on 850 Portland Cobalt Road, correct?
Right.
yes.
Okay, so we'll defer the approval of these minutes then?
Sure.
Okay. Then we'll move backwards to the minutes from May 8th. So seated for that meeting would have been myself. Let's see, this was the special meeting for, yeah, so Victoria, Chantel, Rob, and Jen.
There, this was at the high school.
Right, so Jen is not present, but we can still vote. So any changes, revisions to these minutes? This is a novel, Dawn.
Yeah. What chapter?
Okay, hearing none then, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 8th?
So moved.
And a second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, the minutes from May 8th are approved. And then, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? A second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.